Hello and welcome back to the GamesIndustry.biz Investment Summit online, sponsored by Exola and Renaissance PR. Next up, we have a presentation, Failing with Style, from indie veteran and ex-Sony PlayStation exec, Shahid Ahmad. Again, if you want to ask any questions, this is live, so please do so in the chat area of YouTube, and I'll ask some of those questions at the end. I'll now hand you over to Shahid for his talk. Over to you, Shahid.
Thank you very much. So, failing with style. Start off on a positive note, eh? So, I left PlayStation in December 2015 at the peak of my career to go back to my first love, my roots, making video games. I left with no savings and a very simple plan. Thanks to some SEIS funding arranged by Gavin Harrison and Barry O'Neill, God bless them, I was able to set up Ultimatum Games. Just over 4 years later, we shut it down. The other day, my son says, "Why should I listen to you? What if my way is better?" I said, "That's a very good point, and maybe your way is better. But son, imagine you're at the edge of a jungle filled with treasures." He loves treasures. People ahead of you going in, and very soon you hear them screaming as they're eaten by a tiger or devoured by a snake. Now imagine it's your turn and you're offered a map. The map is not going to tell you where the treasure's buried, but it shows you where the lions and snakes are so you can steer clear. Wouldn't you want the map? Parents are like that for the jungle that is life. Yes, I actually came up with that on the spot. And yes, he got it completely. I'll probably forget in a few weeks. My job today is to tell you about the tigers and snakes I encountered in my time at Ultimatum Games. So let's give you a very quick outline of what I'm going to cover. But first, I've got to work out why my notes have completely failed. Here we go. Absolutely perfect. First, why did I trade something safe for something risky when I have a family and no savings? What an idiot. Second, what we did, I guess the progress of Ultimatum from startup to shutting down. Why did we shutter the company after just 4 years? And kind of a map for the weary traveler. So, why? Why did I do it? Why did I leave something safe? I've been in the business a very long time. 1982 is when I started. And I started as a developer. I worked with developers. I've commissioned developers, funded developers, got to make life a little bit better for some developers. So me of all people, I know how hard it is to make a living as a developer, and it never gets easier. So why, at 49, did I leave what I called the best job in the industry? Well, that's just me. Some people are made up that way. There's no growth in safety, and I've always preferred growth to safety. And I wanted to make games again. And frankly speaking, as a type 1 diabetic, you don't know how long you've got. And I thought, 49 and running out of time, I might never get this chance. If I don't go now, then I'm going to be stuck here. And I wanted to spend more time with my family. And that really was the turning point for me, because the son I talked about earlier, I'd spent no time with him while he was growing up. Absolutely none. I was working every hour God sent. And I loved my work, but I loved my son more. And not commuting saved me the equivalent of around 100 working days a year. And being a programmer, I figured, well, half of that 100 working days a year I'll spend with the family so they can see a bit more of me, and the other half I'll spend working. So I ended up working actually more than I'd been working before anyway, but I ended up having a family life too. But the other thing is, I didn't just leave to become a developer. I have what some people call a portfolio career. Bit of business nonsense there for you. What does that mean? I wear a lot of hats. Why? Well, because I don't go to the pub. um, there's a lot of stuff I just don't do because I'm sad. You could say focused. I don't mind. So I was an advisor to Double 11 for some time. I was a mentor for PlayStation talents. I still am. Love that gig. Love my friends at PlayStation in Madrid and the rest of Iberia. I coached young and some not so young developers for Creative England. I held several advisory positions. I've been the producer on my friend David Eastman's game Floor 13 Deep State for quite a while, helped him get that commissioned by Humble Games, and that is coming out on the 29th. Plug, please, wish list. Very happy with that. And of course, I podcast. Can you tell? I podcast at Remaster on Relay FM. I do guest appearances on tons of other podcasts. So, portfolio career. Still, bit nuts, right? Family, no money. Let's talk about what we actually did. I say we started off with just me because there was a romance of the solo indie life. How stupid was I? First week, I entered Ludum Dare. Thank you, Claire, for asking me to have a crack. It was the end of the first week. I entered Ludum Dare, managed to get a game done. Worked on the PC and the Mac, little word game called Word Up. It's still up on itch if you want to check it out. After that, I thought, you know what? Why don't I make a word game instead of the game I talked to Barry and Gavin about? First mistake. Big change of course. And I did several iterations of this. Eventually, it became something very different. It became a prototype called Logos, which is a VR game. Yeah, 2D word game, simple word game to a full-on VR word-based game with story and so on. I wasn't really able to develop that too much further, so I switched to a project I mentioned publicly. Big mistake. I thought mentioning the project publicly would commit me to finishing it. Little did I know that I'm a sucker for embarrassment and I would end up still not having it commissioned. But I was very close. So towards the end of 2016, I had a very large company say that this is the best concept for VR we've seen all year. Now, of course, I'm quick to mention December because if I'd shown it to them in January, it would have been a very easy bar to reach, right? Best concept we've seen all year. But this was December. So that was a pretty amazing thing for me to achieve. And it looked like they were going to commission it. Sadly, by mid 2017, with very strong indications that it would get signed, they got cold feet. This was a devastating blow from which I eventually recovered, but not without tremendous financial penalty. What I managed to do was, based on the work I did for Chimera Zero, convinced a company to let us work on one of their IPs. I say we became we shortly after. At this point, it was just me. And we got a gig. And I say we. I always think of the company as we. And it was very exciting, hugely exciting, because this was like a path out. At this point, I worked with Kieran Darshanboard, who's probably one of the best programmers in the industry, and Malk Burke, who is one of the best technical artists around. I was very, very, very lucky to get them. Kieran approached me and we worked on this game for a while. Sadly, the game got cancelled at the end of the prototype phase. These things happen. So no big deal. I say no big deal. Here I was now with a really, really good team, and I didn't want to lose them. That was the truth of it. I didn't reassess the situation. I didn't say, oh, well, I better make some big changes that would involve letting down Kieran and Mark. I didn't want to do that. But no, we'll find something. And this is a point at which, as a team, we moved from the goal of eventually creating original stuff to just getting by because we loved working together. We had a great working relationship, a great dynamic. We're all working from home, which is one of the major factors for them joining, because it's not just me anymore enjoying the freedom to control my calendar, but Kieran and Mark also had that too. And just as we were about to run out of money, it's always when you're just about to run out of money, you've got another gig. So this was with Creative Assembly in 2018. And we got to work on Total War Elysium. And then from that point, we staggered from gig to gig, doing good jobs on all of them and trying to eke out little bits of time to work on something original. That's incredibly hard for a small team, as you can imagine. You were all massively overcommitted. And then we did an esports observer module on a VR game called Final Assault for Smilegate and Phaserlock. Phaserlock are in the States. And 2018, I went to, was it GDC? Yeah, it's GDC I went to and got told by a very large company, a different large company this time, who I'd been pitching Chimera Zero to, that we would get that funded. We shook hands, had a celebratory meal and all of that. And you know how this ends, right? A year later, after that meeting, they've backed out. There were some internal communication issues. And that blow was even more devastating. And at this point, of course, the financial penalty is enormous. But we still managed to find time to port Shenmue 1 and 2 to Game Pass for Windows in time for E3. Yeah, that's quite a gig to get, right, for a small startup team where there were just three of us. And then we worked on Virtual Reality, which was the first game ever commissioned by an Islamic NGO. We did that for Islamic Relief. We're very proud of that. This time I worked with Ron Donkin, who did an absolutely magnificent job. And we created something pretty special. It got covered by the BBC, Telegraph, Sky, pretty much everywhere. Really, really big coverage in the UK for that game. The client was pleased. We were very pleased with the result, but it's the commission game, so there's going to be no back end. So it's not a sustainable approach. And then finally, the very last gig we did was Overcooked 2, which we ported to Game Pass for Windows. But not only did we do a plain port, we created a fully cross-platform, platform-agnostic, real-time multiplayer stack from scratch. I say we, Kieran did that. I had nothing to do with that. I could understand maybe half of what he was talking about when he bounced problems off me, but man, was he on a mission. The guy's just a machine. Have I sold Kieran enough? Okay. Enough Kieran selling. Malk was also ace, by the way. I'm going to get to what I did with Malk separately. So Malk and I, while Kieran was focused primarily on the guts of porting, there was less for me and Malk to do. Sometimes Malk had more to do, sometimes less. Sometimes I had a bit to do. And most of my stuff was client liaison at this point, which is what I should have been focused on from the beginning. So Malk and I worked on an original IP called Death is That Way, which you might have heard of because it got covered quite a lot by a lot of my developer friends at the turn of last year. We didn't manage to get that picked up. It was an early concept. We had some interest, but the prototype, frankly, was not convincing enough for a lot of people. I know what I need to do in order to make it convincing. We just ran out of time and we ran out of money. Not only that, but Malk and I also worked on a VR prototype called To Be Frank, set in the same game world, by the way, but a completely different type of game. Now, that's a really good demo. I'm pleased with that one. I think I could probably get that picked up. But guess what? I've been so busy with the end of Ultimatum and the beginning of what I'm doing now that I still haven't got around to really properly pitching that. And I could, and I should. Many of you will recognize this. So that's what we did, right? But you want to know why we shut down, don't you? And another way of putting it is, why did we fail? I don't like the word failure. So let's talk about success instead. I like to say that the soup of success consists of three ingredients: sweat, tears, and failure. Or you can look at success like an iceberg, right? So what's visible is success. What's hidden is failure. You don't get the majesty of the visible without the toil of the hidden. A success and failure are matters of perspective. I mean, a success can be a smile and a thumbs up after waking from anesthesia, a high point in a year-long ordeal of sickness and surgeries. Yeah, that was a success for me many years ago. I mean, should Gandhi be considered a failure because he held some questionable views? Talking of Gandhi, he said one of my favorite quotes about what seems like the futility of hard work or the futility of effort. He said, "Whatever you do will be insignificant, but it is very important that you do it." I apologize. Actually, no, I don't apologize for not adopting Ben Kingsley's accent in delivering that line. That'd be going too far, even though I can do it absolutely perfectly. But in these days, I'd probably get shut down very, very quickly and cancelled and all of that. Anyway, despite my obvious affinity with Ben's original land. Right. Now I want to talk about a bit more perspective to do with failure and success and how we frame it. In 2001, I set up a startup company called, very originally, Start Games. And after 2 years of this company, the idea behind which was to help developers who were finding it difficult to get funding for the consoles of the time, and at that time the dominant console was the PS2, if you recall, to help them create a demo good enough to get picked up by a publisher. That was the idea of Start Games. And just as we started to get some traction, Total Overdose was one of ours. We did an MTV music generator thing as well. That was one of ours. Telewest, who were the original funders, pulled the second tranche of funding. So sometimes I like to say Start Games was ahead of its time, but you and I both know that that's just code for total failure. So why was it a failure? Well, it wasn't really. It ran out of money. It was a good idea. It was beginning to work. The amazing thing about Start Games is Telewest's contact for me at that time was a gentleman by the name of Murray Hume, who years later I would work with at PlayStation. So fast forward to 2011, 2012, when I start to set up a team called Strategic Content. I'm working in Murray's department. Yeah. And Strategic Content was founded on very similar developer-friendly A&R focused principles that Start Games was based on. So if you take that story arc from start to Strategic Content, you suddenly got the makings of an absolutely amazing film. And you stop it there, and man, I'm the greatest success in the face of the planet. You stop at the end of Ultimatum Games, and wow, I'm the guy who ditched the greatest job in the industry to become an utter failure at indie development, right? It doesn't really help to end things arbitrarily and say, yeah, that's it, that's your entire life, you're a success, that's it, your entire life, you're a failure. Isaac Newton, for example, would you call him a failure? But the thing is, after all of his incredible success, I think what's he trying to do? He's trying to find a way that he could unite everything he'd learned under God in some way. And of course, he died trying to do that. Spent the last maybe 10, 20 years of his life trying to do that. Would you call Isaac Newton, sorry, apologies, Sir Isaac Newton, a failure? You wouldn't, would you? Same again with Gandhi. Would you say because he got assassinated that he was a failure? It's ludicrous to have these labels. They only serve us in stories. This, of course, is a story, so I'm going to carry on using these rather tricky labels. So I defined success as being able to continue to make games while owning my calendar. That means the freedom to do what I want to do when I want to do it. That is something that you don't appreciate or value until you've tried it for a while. And there's an awesome responsibility to it, but once you've got it, it's very, very hard to go back. And it's something that I gave to all of the people we worked with at Ultimatum. So by that metric, I'm still successful. And if you're careful about what success means to you, you can be very successful. But if success means fame, you're going to feel a lot of pain. If success means waking up and finding it easy to take a deep breath, well, you're going to find that feels a lot more resourceful. Another thing I'd done is I'd silently changed the target to one of being able to support the team that I had. So you've got to beware of silently or unconsciously changing your targets. The other thing is, this is a big mistake, and I'm really frustrated with myself that I didn't spot this sooner. When I left PlayStation, I did it to do what I wanted to do, rather than what the market wanted. Critical error, because the market is ruthless. I mean, I was dimly aware of the distinction, but it should have been foremost in my mind, particularly during the important first year, when I should have spent my career capital as well as my actual capital a bit more prudently. And we did well when we solved problems for customers, and we did badly when we didn't. And we didn't solve enough problems, and that's essentially what it boils down to. And then I had this new metric of just keeping the team going. I mean, it's not very inspiring, that just keep the team going. There was a reason. The reason I wanted to keep the team going was because it's a really good team. And I was convinced that if we got to work on an original title together, that we'd make something amazing, because we were punching way above our weight. And we could have kept going, but we decided to stop because in the end, it really was just a bit too much to put on me. And talking of putting stuff on me, I guess you want to know, did I do enough? Could I have done more? I think I did. I think I did enough. We kept the company going a long time. We didn't go bust, but I was put under enormous financial strain. And that's unsustainable. I did all the things you're supposed to do to improve personal effectiveness. I woke early, you know about that. I worked from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. every weekday and on many weekends. I meditated, I ate properly, I drank loads of water. I got into flow state like a beast. I used this thing called Brain FM, which is something that binaurally entrains your mind to go into flow really, really quickly and keep you there for ages. Works a treat. Lifetime subscriber. I don't get affiliate referral codes or anything like that, so you can have that one for nothing. I went to the gym regularly. I did the affirmations, I did the goal setting, I took cold showers, and I hustled like a madman. I really, really hustled. I took too long to do that, though. It was a long time before I went out into the world, so to speak. Barry had something really amazing to say about this when I went to a GDC, and he encouraged me to go to the GDC. And he said, you get into that mindset where it's too small in there. We're talking about, the shed, which I love, but it's too big out there. It's really interesting tension between a kind of claustrophobia and agoraphobia. Very interesting phenomenon. And seeing people changes all of that. So going to GDC was really, really important. But yeah, I hustled. I spoke to a lot of people. And you can imagine with the amount of experience I've gotten, how long I've been in the industry, and the amount of contacts I've made. And thankfully, some of the goodwill I've generated, it was quite easy for me to get meetings with key decision makers. Now, in the 4 years and a little bit, our output was actually formidable. From a standing start, We learned a lot. We got gigs that many other companies our size would have struggled to have got. And that was amazing. We made our clients happy, but we did shift the goalposts without thinking about it. And that whole month to month thing is just not going to take off. And that's why we stopped. It was time to call it a day. Mercifully, it was Barry and Gavin who suggested that we shutter the company. Because I probably would have gone on until I ground myself into dust. And to their immense credit, they said, if it's going to make things a bit easier for you, and it didn't, of course, because I didn't want to do this, but if it's going to make things easier for you, then the best thing is that we shutter it. It was my decision. They left it to me, and I said, okay, let's do this. So, I promised you a map. Get enough sleep. And that's absolutely key. It's so easy to forget this. And I know I fetishized getting almost no sleep for a long time, and I was stupid. It was actually Kieran who sent me a link. It was a video of Matt Walker. And at first it's like, yeah, I know sleep's important. And I thought, no, he sent it to me. Let's do him the courtesy of watching it. And I read the list of things that go wrong when you don't sleep. And it was staggering. And you don't notice, you know. So when your brain is impaired, you don't notice what you're not noticing anymore. The things that you're becoming impaired at, you think are down to something else. It couldn't possibly be lack of sleep, could it? Yeah, it could. So do read Why We Sleep by Matt Walker. I highly recommend that book. Changed my life. Do I get enough sleep now? Probably not, but a lot more than I used to get. Don't do too much. That's key. And when I say don't do too much, what I mean is don't take on too many responsibilities. In the beginning, you'll have no choice if there's just one of you, or if there's a couple of you. You know, you'll have to wear many hats. But as soon as you can pass the work on to someone who's better at it, do that. Work with other people. It's not just about other people doing stuff they're better at than you are. It's about having other people to talk to about what you're doing, having that shared vision, having that shared experience. Especially in these times, that's incredibly important. And here's a key one. Focus on what the market wants. Right. I'm telling some of you indies to sell out, right? No, I'm not, actually. I'm telling you the exact opposite. Because if you're exceptional, and it takes time to become exceptional, then what you want and what the market wants overlap, sometimes significantly. If you think about Stardew Valley, that was a prime example. Now, I personally don't have the skill or the perseverance to create something that detailed, that large, that takes that long to make. But there are some of you out there who do have that, and whose skill and experience and insight do match what the market wants. And here's the other thing, you're not going to like to hear this, but you're probably not Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is the kind of person who could lead the market. You know, like Henry Ford said, if I asked the people what they wanted, they'd say, I want a faster horse. Right? So both Ford and Jobs were very much against the idea of market research. And they thought, we're going to innovate, we're going to create the demand ourselves, and we don't believe in market research. But you're probably not that. I'm definitely not that. And so certainly to begin with, until you develop the taste and the experiences and the intuition so that your needs and the market needs overlap sufficiently, I would say serve the market, because that's how you become sustainable. And that's what it's about. I'm now of the mindset that I want to continue doing what I'm doing. And in order to do that, I've got to solve problems that the market wants solving. Nobody cares about me wanting to make Chimera. They really don't. I mean, there are a few of us old fogies who remember the game, you know, and who keep teasing me and so on about remaking it. And I will, I promise, I will remake it. But only when I'm good enough, only when I've got an idea that I think the market will want. And then it'll be worth doing, and then the name will become irrelevant. The whole point of something like Chimera and redoing it was not to redo a game I made 20 million years ago, right? It was that a long time ago, I stopped being a developer and I missed that really badly. And I wanted to go back. So Chimera is almost a code for, well, I'm doing what I love again. And if that means that right now, for example, I'm porting a game, well, I'm loving that. And before this call, I was actually working on some code and loving every minute. I mean, what's not to like about that? If you can serve the market, you will get to do what you want to do. Might not be your heart's desire, but you'll get to your heart's desire incrementally. Won't necessarily happen overnight. Watch your resources like a hawk. What's the most important resource? Attention. Everyone's after your attention, right? This accursed thing here. I've turned it off. Anyway, you know Yuval Harari? He's the author of Sapiens, Homo Deus, and that kind of thing. Absolutely brilliant. He doesn't have a mobile phone. That's right. He doesn't have a mobile phone. He has a landline. And also, he doesn't read the news. I hardly read any news at all myself now, unless someone shares something with me. Read Stop Reading the News by Rolf Dobelli, if you think I'm nuts. I've had a few arguments with people on social media about this, but seriously, if it's really important, you'll find out about it. And the rest of it is just outrage porn designed to steal your attention and give the media outlets advertising money. I'm not saying don't consume media at all, but don't get stuck in that endless loop of being outraged and upset. You'll never produce anything that way. You'll never be any good to yourself or anyone else if you're constantly outraged. The other resource you've got to be careful with, of course, is capital. And when I say capital, I don't just mean money, though money is, of course, incredibly important. I wish I'd looked after the company's money better. But even if I'd been an absolute skinflint and not spent the barest penny more than I needed to spend, if I hadn't got my strategy right, if I hadn't got my focus right, that would have meant nothing because it would just have been a longer runway to death, right? So the other important aspect of capital is your career capital. It's another business nonsense term. Career capital basically means your reputation, right? You spend, as Buffett said, 20 years building a reputation, and it can take you 5 minutes to destroy it. So guard your reputation really, really carefully. And when you use it really, really carefully. And finally, your personal energy is a valuable resource. Hard work is not the answer. It's not the answer. I mean, it is an answer, but it's not the answer, because let's face it, how many people are there out there, even in the Western world, working 3 jobs just to make ends meet, just to try and make it to the next month? Too many, right? So if that was the answer, these people, bless them, would be billionaires. And so would I. I mean, I would be absolutely minted, given how hard I've worked over my life. But it's what you work on that counts. And it's how focused you are on what you're doing. And how carefully you avoid flitting from one thing to another. Peter Drucker says that you've got to work on the most important thing. That's it. At every moment, you need to know what that is. If you don't know what that is, then you're not really being effective. He talks about this in The Effective Executive. It's probably the most important thing, being able to prioritize. That requires hard thinking and real thinking. And that's probably one of the hardest things of all to do. The other thing is avoid wallowing in failure porn. Now, you can imagine that my first Google search of this term was not very pretty. So only Google this term if you've got your search filters set to strict. Anyway, failure porn. Right, yeah, some of those images came to mind, for which I must apologize. This is the idea in the startup world. that you got to talk about your failures, almost as if you're at an AA meeting. Now, an AA meeting is a private place, but people are very prone to talking about failure very publicly. That's not going to help you. Failure is not sexy, forgive my terminology. Failure is brutal. And strong people are able to lift themselves up after failures, but not everyone is able to pick themselves up quickly. So I would urge you not to keep talking about your failures like they're the things that molded you. Yes, from time to time, when the setting is right, talk about that. But, if you can avoid fixating on the failures being in some way romantic, especially when they hurt, that's going to be better for your mental health. Paul Simon said in one of his songs, every generation throws a hero up the pop charts. We love our heroes, right? Our entire history is filled with stories of impossibly heroic deeds. And we used to overlook their shortcomings, but not anymore. We're obsessed with failure porn. Another map pin for you. Focus on output, not outcome. You're very much in control of your effort and productivity, but you're never in control of your outcome. Becoming goal obsessed will close your mind to other amazing alternative successes and possibilities. Penicillin was not discovered through goal obsession. The post-it note was not discovered through goal obsession. And Viagra was not discovered through goal obsession. All of the people working on these things were not looking for the things that they ended up finding. They worked hard, but their minds were open. So just being fixated on a single goal will probably be painful. If you can be slightly flexible, but keep working hard, you'll enjoy great outcomes. And there's loads of great outcomes you could have. Right, let's bring this to a close, shall we? It's not failure when you learn. You're only failing when you're flailing. Sorry, couldn't resist that one. Failure is just another step to success. And that's however you want to define it. Failure is going to hurt. You can't avoid that. What are you going to do when you fail? How have you prepared mentally? What do? Well, I take cold showers. I wake up early. Yeah, I was a night owl all my life, but I conditioned myself to wake up early. Why is this important? It means you can master the difficult. If you can master your physiology, even to the basic degree of being able to take regular cold showers, your body's going, no! And you're going, you will listen to me and I will bring you to heal. It's a tiny little example of being able to control your psychology. I started Couch to 5K 6 weeks ago. And that's another really good example. I know lots of you do much more physical exercise than I do. That much should be apparent. But Couch to 5K is great because it's another example of how I can tame my psychology, which basically wants to say to me, you were never made to run. You are not meant to do this. You're never going to keep this up once it stops. And I just say to this voice, because we all have this voice, Stephen Pressfield calls it the resistance. I just say to this voice, thank you. I've got a pressing engagement right now. I will attend to you in 30 minutes. And of course, in 30 minutes time, that voice is shut up. But you are going to experience pain. And Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. But I prefer Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. What are you going to do when you get punched in the mouth? Have you prepared for that? And the only route to success is through failure. When things start to get tough, you're close to the summit. Don't get mad. Get curious. Yeah, there's a little twist there. Get curious. I find when I have really, really difficult problems, I take a deep breath instead of getting frustrated at how difficult the problem is and how I feel like I'm not getting anywhere, I go, ah, interesting. Maybe there's another way of solving this. Maybe I've missed something. Where else could I look? What else could this mean? It's a great approach to debugging, but it's also a great approach to life. And your job as a business owner is to find and keep customers. Every day, your highest priority should be to get customers and keep customers. If you want to earn a living from video games, you have to learn the game of business. So, what next for me? Well, I'm still a developer. I'm still doing a lot of other things, perhaps too many, but I'm still a developer. I'm writing a newsletter. I'm working on a book. I'm advising companies. I'm still doing the Remaster podcast. I'm getting ready to record an album. I don't like to rest. I'm learning languages. Floor 13 Deep State is coming out later this month. I'm about to start YouTubing. God help me. Anyway, success. It's when you crest the peak and for a single breathtaking moment take in the glorious vista. But does that make the climb, when you didn't see the summit, a failure? Success is an event for which the method is failure. So when we achieve, that's not success. That's failing with style.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shahid. That was really great and really honest and very philosophical, and yeah, it was some amazing stuff in there. We've got a few questions, if that's okay. I can put to you. So you mentioned that you made some mistakes early on. What was the main thing that you would do differently on immediately starting up your company? If you could go through that again.
I'd meet lots of people. Straight away, I'd meet lots of people. I would find out what people wanted. I would find out what their pain points were. And when I say people, I mean prospects, potential clients. So I'd find out what their pain points were, and I would work like a madman to focus in on those pain points and help them solve those pain points. So meeting lots of people, listening really hard, rather than coding like crazy, which is what I did.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's good advice for everyone. You mentioned that one of the reasons that you left Sony was because you wanted to spend more time with your family and working from home. Obviously,
Yeah.
in the current pandemic, everyone seems to be working from home, or most people are. Do you think we're seeing a kind of cultural change here, where more people are going to work from home and spend more time with their families? Bossa, for example, have said that if any of their employees want to continue working from home, they can do. They can also come into the office as well. But do you think we're seeing a sort of quickening of this change in cultural change in working from home more, or do you think things will return to a kind of normal after all this?
There's never going to be a return to the old normal. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way. Sometimes you need a crisis to help you to take stock. And what this crisis has done has made a lot of business leaders realize that the old way was, for many types of industry, ready for retirement, not suitable for purpose, and uncompetitive. Because in today's massively interconnected world, if you choose to limit yourself to people who can only connect to you physically, that is, people who can commute to an office, you're massively limiting your talent pool. So that's the first thing. The other thing is you're forcing people to live in expensive places, which makes them less happy, because the expensive places are the ones that are close to industrial centers or creative centers. That's unsustainable. That means that people who don't make a ton of money to begin with, who are never able to afford to move into expensive areas, but who are immensely talented, are not available to you. The other thing is there are an awful lot of skilled people who just can't make that sacrifice of committing the same number of hours a day, sometimes more than the same number of hours a day, sometimes a ridiculous number of hours a day, to a job in which they hope to advance. Whereas if you're able to work remotely, you might actually be more productive. I'm working remotely for the last few years. I say remotely, I'm like 20 years remote from my house in the shed. But what I mean is everyone I work with is based from home as well. That flexibility gives you such peace of mind. That peace of mind makes for a happier person. The happier person is going to produce better work and be more committed because they're going to reward the freedom and flexibility you offer them with loyalty. Who wouldn't? Who would want to lose that? And that's one of the chief reasons why I kept Ultimatum going long past I knew it was unsustainable, because I realized how much people were enjoying the freedom that we were offering. And I know there are lots of other people doing this too, but you know me with a whole philosophical style and very hands off and very supportive and nurturing approach. But I really mean it, because some people say it, right? But those are the written rules, and the unwritten rules are different. The unwritten rules are, oh yeah, you still need to be available on Slack 9 to 5. You still need to respond to me pinging you within a certain time, otherwise you're not at your desk. Well, that's just another form of slavery. All of this stuff is going to go away because people have learned that it's possible to be hugely productive even when you're disconnected.
That's really interesting. Also, you mentioned obviously that you had quite a few projects that you were involved in where it fell through later on in the process, where you thought you had something signed up, and then it was cancelled, or people moved, jobs, and the team changed and things like that. I hear this constantly in the industry. Is there anything that developers can do to kind of insure themselves against this happening to them, or is it just part of the business and something that you just have to prepare for and build into your business model?
Yeah. Decades ago, I remember a publisher saying to a developer, and I won't say who the publisher was and I won't say who the developer was, but I was probably involved somewhere. The publisher saying to the developer who'd spent months on this demo without getting anything for it, well, that's just the cost of doing business. Okay, but that money's got to come from somewhere. And if it's not going to come from the profit on milestone payments, where is it going to come from? So the only thing that can happen that would help here is that publishers and others see it as a responsibility to the industry to pay developers, even for work for hire work, not just at cost, but with a decent profit. Because without that profit, you've got no buffer. And that's what cost us. We tried to do as much as we could in our own time to work on these projects which we were trying to pitch. And as I said, it's ruthless. The market is ruthless. So it is going to happen. You are going to get people pulling out. You have got to expect that. You've got to keep your pipeline filled. And in some ways, you have to be ruthless as a developer as well. You can't be sentimental. And coming from a very sentimental guy, that's very hard for me to say. But if the price of being sentimental is that you overcommit to one prospect and then your business fails, well, that sentiment was, in the end, not valuable to the people you were working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, talking about your obviously you had a reputation, you had a great track record when you
Had
started up the company. You continue to have to enjoy a marvelous track record, Shahid. So,
Thank you.
did you said that you said that that opened doors, and we've heard this quite a few times in the investment summit, where if you have a track record, it really helps you, get those meetings with publishers and investors. When you had those meetings, did you think about any other kind of business models and ways of running your business? For example, did you look at VC investment and looking at perhaps taking, on an investor to invest in your company, or did you stick to the kind of traditional sort of publisher developer relationship? Were you more comfortable with that because that was the background you came from?
Well, we had investment. We had SEIS investment raised by Barry and Gavin, which is what set us off to begin with. Now, VC would only have made sense if we'd had something of value in the company. Now, there are two types of value you can build in a games company: a product stroke service or process. So a process that gives you some kind of advantage in the field. It's very hard to make a VC interested in process. It's much easier to do it through product services, and more so services because there's a sustained source of revenue potential with services over just an IP. Of course, if the IP is huge, that's different. So I spoke with platforms, platform holders. I spoke with publishers. I spoke with funds. And because we had two big trips, the only thing I could do to stop us falling was to get traditional work, which is not why I set up Ultimatum Games. It was not to keep a treadmill of work for hire projects going. I mean, there were great work for hire projects, don't get me wrong. And the partners we had were amazing. I mean, working with Sega was a joy. Working with all of our partners was a joy. They're all very good partners, high profile and so on. But there's no future in that for a small company. Not when you're up against giants who are amazing at it and who can throw a whole bunch of resources at it and who pay dearly to get to where they are. We were never going to be that, and we never wanted to be that. And that was why we stopped, because we tripped twice. We'd been promised. The promises were broken. I had not focused on problem solving enough. I was sentimental enough to pursue devotedly these two options on the table, and that cost us dearly. So while I could have spoken to a VC, it would have been a waste of time without decent set of products or service. And we never had the time to do that because our main time was spent working on these work for hire projects, and any sideline time we had was spent trying to create new IP. And that was very, very hard to do, especially when the team's very small and we didn't have anything in the bank.
Yeah, it must be very difficult to balance that work for hire and doing your own IP. It's something I hear a lot from developers.
Yeah,
I
it's
was
a
going to
problem
ask
of the
you.
ages.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you, to anyone that's looking at setting up a games company, an indie games company, would you say it's a good thing, or should they go into the industry first? This is something that I hear from students. Should they set up their own company, or should they go into a business first? Is it a good environment? Is this a good time to set up a company?
It depends why you're doing it. What's your motive for setting up a company? Do you have something already? If you have something already, do you own it? Is it something you've been working on while you're at another company? If you're a student, you probably don't have anything yet. Maybe you started on something and then you set up a company to protect the IP, but you need to sustain yourself. To finish first you must finish, right? So you need to find a way of sustaining yourself. And if you can sustain yourself, you have something that can help you spin the wheels then you can focus on building value. So that's not the answer that everyone wants to hear. They want to hear a yes or no. And my guess is that people are imagining that with my example, I'm going to be once bitten, twice shy. Well, at my age, it's like 25,000 times bitten and still not shy, mate. Still not shy, you know. So that persistence is key. But if you're young, here's the other thing. The risk calculus changes as you age. When you're young, yeah, take risks, do it. If you're young, I would give you the Ray Bradbury quote that I myself was forced to act on in 2015, and that quote is something along the lines of just jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. You know, when you're young,
That's
you can
games
do that.
development, isn't it?
Well, it's any risk where you're too frightened to take the jump. It's any risk,
Yeah.
right? And his advice is just do it and build the wings on the way down. Because, yeah, fine. I mean, and I would say okay, but just make sure you're carrying a rucksack full of feathers and glue first, right? Otherwise, you're just asking for trouble. But when you're younger, you can do this. You can take risks, you can take falls much more easily. The impact on your life is not massive. At my age, you got to be more careful. You got to be more sensible. And I'm not. I'm not careful. I'm not sensible. But I'm a romantic, so I carry on doing it. So my advice would be, if this is a thing that you really want to do, find a way of doing it. But first, find a way to sustain yourself. The reason I left was not because I wanted to leave PlayStation. I loved that gig. I made that gig, you know. But I was not able to make games while I was there. Two reasons. First of all, I wasn't allowed because of my profile. It would have been seen as a conflict of interest. But a second reason is I loved that job so much, I gave it everything. I worked 16 hours a day. Where was the time
Yeah.
for me to work on my own thing? So if you can work on your own thing while sustaining yourself, do that. Think of Hollywood, right? In Hollywood, every restaurant you go to, what do the waiters say they're doing? They're actors. They're actors, right? But they're waiting on tables to pay their way. That's the creative industry. Yeah? So lots of people don't want to hear that. People want to hear, oh, it needs to be a stable job, needs to be this and that. No, it's a creative industry. There are going to be risks. You can't predict what the market will like because tastes are fickle. And that's the risk. If you want this life, you need to have some appetite for risk. And if you're really sure you want that, find a way of sustaining yourself, find a way of building the thing that you want to build. The other thing I would advise is if you don't have any experience, get as much experience as you can. And if that means joining a small developer to begin with, helping in some way, do that because you'll get that experience from people who know. I talked earlier about having a map, right? That's what parents are for. Well, experienced developers will be the same for a young developer. So if you're a young graduate who doesn't know too much about game development, save yourself a lot of time. Maybe you're ultra smart. Maybe you'll go into that developer, you'll see the way they're doing things, and you say, but did you know I've just been doing this research at university last year? There's a better way of doing this. And in doing that, they're improving not just that developer, but the industry. If you're a bit older, then naturally you've got to become more risk averse, get some savings. If you get made redundant, don't immediately think I'm going to blow all my redundancy money on building a studio unless you really, really, really want to do this. You know what you're doing and you have the support of your family. I really, really wanted to do this. I had the support of my family. I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, that's not completely true. It's partially true, but but I should have focused on the market. That was the biggest mistake.
Fantastic, Shahid. Well, thank you ever so much for the talk today. It's been really interesting, fascinating, and some great insights there for developers and for people just for their lives. Really, some very good stuff in there. Good luck with your projects, whatever you're working on, Chimera 2, whatever when that comes along. Best of luck, and stay in touch with us. We'd love to hear what you're up to in the future as well.
Thank you very much. And wish list floor 13 Deep State, please.
Good stuff. Got your plug in there. Brilliant. Uh, Fantastic. Thank you very much to Shahid there. That was marvellous. You can find the links to all our talks and panels at live.gamesindustry.biz. Cheers for joining us and see you again soon.